Hi, I'm William, and this is Foil Driven. This week, I've got a few things I want to talk about. I suppose the first one I will talk about is there's a new motor mount from Takeoff. So I'll go through this one a little bit. I had a question in the comments about how I went from beginning to do foil assist jumps on, say, a Takeoff flow or a foil drive to where I am now, which it's taken a long time, but I think a lot of it came together very quickly in the last few months. So we'll talk about that. What else do we got? Oh yeah, I bought a Hoverair X1 Pro Max for this program. One of the sponsors requested that we get some better footage, and hiring a drone pilot out here is somewhat difficult and expensive, so this was the easy way to try. I'll talk about what it did well and what it absolutely did not do well. Before you buy one of those, you should probably watch this and we can talk about that. Matter of fact, let's start that, because there might be some people that are tuning into this based on the Hoverair, and I don't want to bore them with all the foil drive stuff and all the Manta stuff. So let's start with that. I got the drone, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and when I got it, it followed very well, especially on land, much better than most of the drones I've ever tried. I was pretty confident that it could do it, but it follows based on your head. It tracks your head, and if your head goes low, the drone goes low, and its settings are, low, medium, and high, and near and far, or near, mid, and far, and all of them are within the same, I want to say, 1.5 meters. And if you fall into the water, if it's, say, maybe half a meter above your head, when you go down and fall in the water, it is now sitting at the very least, or the very best, 1/2 meter or so above the water, maybe even 1 meter. But if you have any waves coming in whatsoever, and it comes crashing towards the water, and a wave comes at it, it just doesn't stand a chance to survive. And so what I've done was, it took some great footage. And you can see here, I managed the first time to go out and time it so that it got over the waves and I didn't fall. And when I did fall, it stayed there and hovered, which wasn't a big deal because I was supposed to have a 16-minute flight time. I timed it for around 10 minutes just in case I had to rush out and fly it back in. I left the remote. It doesn't come with a remote, but I bought this beacon and some joysticks with it so that I could, have somebody else fly this thing and adjust the flight level while they were tracking me. It sounded like a great idea. In theory it was, but I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. I don't think it's ready to go over rough waters. Now, if you're a dock starter, I think this is a great drone for you. I think it'll follow you. I think it's pretty safe that it'll, not go into the water. If you fall in, it'll stop short, especially if you have somebody co-piloting it with the new firmware, keeping it high. But in my case, I tried that. And when I tried it, the beacon disconnected and the drone just got thrown off by the wave movements and me falling in the water, and it just went out of control and then followed me into the water very quickly. So with that, if you saw that video, please don't go buy it yet. That being said, I've reached out to Hoverair. I've volunteered my services to help them, alpha test any new firmware that might have a surf-only setting, something that would maintain them a minimum altitude of, say, at least, 15 to 20 foot above the water, or at least above your head. And if you fall in, if you keep it to say 6 foot waves, there's still enough buffer that it's not going to go in the water. With something like that, if you could space 2 of these drones at the same time, you could possibly have, a multi-cam shoot following you, and then could return to home if it loses track. That's all wishful thinking right now because they don't have that in the firmware, but if they did, man, would this be a great value. So I don't want to say never buy this. I'd say keep an eye on Hoverair. And if you're a dock starter, or if you just want it for dock starting, I think it's a relatively safe bet, but I still get the hover care just in case something goes wrong, so that they'll replace it for a small fee if, the worst happens, like it happened to me. So hopefully they'll replace mine. I think there was a malfunction on my drone, so I don't think Hovercare really applies in this case. Hopefully it's one off. Hopefully they send me a new one and it does maintain, say, 15 foot. That would be awesome. So the footage was great. It shoots in 8K. It folds up against, you can stick it in your pocket. What a great drone, but unfinished right now. So I don't want to do a full review with it quite yet, because the video I shot for the review is basically you watch me launch it, I go out into the water, and it goes dunking into the water, and that is just not a good look. And I don't think it's representative of what they can do with just a little bit of tweaking. So hopefully Hoverair is watching this and you're willing to help me work out the bugs, because I think you got a great product. Okay, speaking of great products, it was sent just today, in fact. I haven't got it mounted to my board yet, but there's a new motor pod for the Takeoff Flow, and this thing is pretty nice. It's sort of reminiscent of the Universal from foil drive with some slight modifications. It's sort of got a couple different inserts, one for the rear and a couple different sizes for up front. You throw these things into their sleeves, put it around the mast. This slides in. Let's try this again. This slides in, and let me see if I can do it right, just like that. And there you have it. And it goes in and out. It's got a couple bolts there, so you can tighten it down. It looks like it's pretty good tight grip. This is made from not like 3D printed material or anything like that. This is like that carbon plastic, sort of like you'd have on a gun stock. Pretty heavy duty, nice. Same with this. Looks like it's got pretty strong screw inserts, so you don't need to worry about over tightening too much, I don't think, with this one. We'll see with that. And then you have this gets connected to the back of the motor, or the front of the motor, and then it gets pushed into the cap. So looks like a pretty good mount. I think the biggest issue I have with some of these is these, not necessarily these, but other brands. Eventually the universal fit kind of wears out and you got to tape your mast and that kind of stuff. I'm hoping this is an answer. This seems like a pretty solid, this doesn't seem like printed TPU. This looks like it's possibly molded rubber. So hopefully this works out long term. I won't know for about a year, because that's about how long most of these things last without any sort of adjustment, which is honestly, that's a pretty good lifespan if you're riding this thing every day. All right, so now let's move on to my jump progression. And I started off, of course, I started wing foiling. I did a bunch of jumps with that, but it did not translate whatsoever. Well, for the most part, didn't translate well to foiling. And so how did I start it? I started in the same process I did with wings. And that is, I started off, my jumps were not necessarily jumps. It was just the idea that I was going to come to the surface, breach, try to get the front foil completely out of the water, and then drop back in and try to recover. I think that's a pretty reasonable goal for most people. But let's assume that if someone was going to come into this, they're going to come into it with straps, because strap jumps are easier than strapless. But the problem with that is riding strapped is somewhat, I think, difficult for a lot of people to start with. I came straight from winging. I never got out of straps. So I've been riding straps since I started with a foil drive a long time ago, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And so it's natural to me with riding straps. But I think before you really try any of this stuff like breeches and all that kind of stuff, I would learn how to ride straps and also how to fall in kind of every direction with straps, because that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to learn how to bail safely out of that before, because what you don't want to do is get stuck in the straps and then break an ankle or something because you panicked at the last moment. So I think that's the biggest danger for people who are starting, is knowing how to bail out of this. And these are jumping is dangerous. It's inherently dangerous. So I'm going to say I don't recommend anybody doing it, but I'll tell you how I did it, and we can go from there. Anyway, strap jumps, I started with the breeches, and then I just started shooting for like maybe 1 inch out of the water, you know, in flat water. I think my first 4-wheel drive jump was with the Gen 1 system, and I jumped down a wave, and I was probably only a few inches off, and I don't even know if I landed it. I probably didn't, but the wave was enough to just make me go straight out and get an easy breach for, you know, a couple inches. So that was an easy way to start. But I think flat water is a great place to work it out on a flat day. Go out and just try these breaches. After I started doing that, I started increasing the height and trying things like grabs. Most of them in the beginning were basically I'd jump and I'd peak and then I drop straight down. If you can avoid that by starting with a lot of speed and not shooting to go straight up in the air, but sort of a longer jump, and you'll have probably easier success than trying to just shoot it way up in the air and then, you know, just go for height, because height is not going to help you at first. It's going to be a little bit of speed and a flat jump, I think, is the easiest way to start learning how to land, because jumping's easy once you ride straps. It's sort of just a one long, if you're pumping, it's basically a pump without stopping where you'd normally stop, you know, at the surface. You just go ahead and carry that pump all the way through and out of the water. That's pretty much how you jump. You're making a little miniature ramp in the water with your foil and going up like that. That's at least that's how I'm doing it with a throttle in flat water. And so I went, okay, I'll try these strapless ollies. The strapless ollies were pretty intense. They're a difficult move, but what it did was it forced me to really work on landings, because what I didn't want to do was mess up the landing and have that board just go crazy on me, you know, whether it's shooting out the front or you know, hitting the water and I go sliding forward and get hit by the foil. So I didn't want any of that, so I really focused on landing the jumps. At the same time, I went, okay, I still sort of fear this, and so I'm going to do this as many times as possible so that I am no longer afraid of this, that it becomes sort of routine. And that's what I did. I went for 100 jumps. 50 of them, the first 50 were all on that Jimmy Lewis. They were all strapless. I got when you're learning this, landings were wired, and then my unifoil, Foil the World board, you know, arrived. Straps. First I did a couple, you know, strapless ollies on it. It was amazing. And then I put the straps on and I just went crazy with this thing. I mean, now, you know, I can do sort of, as far as boards, I think a slightly bigger board is easier to land because it gives you a little cushion when you hit the water, and you can kind of ride out. It gives you a better chance of surviving a bad landing. However, this 30-liter, you know, Foil the World board is really good about helping me land. So I haven't had any issues with ride-outs on this board. It seems like, I don't know if I've just gotten better or this board is just about as good as that 45-liter Jimmy Lewis, but it seems pretty good. So if you want to go smaller, it's easier to maneuver in the air. If you want to go bigger, it's easier to ride out. So keep that in mind. I think that's all I got. Thanks. Until next time, this has been Foil Driven.